Good morning, everybody. Dear honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's really a pleasure for me to welcome you here on behalf of the EU-PolarNet Consortium and its cooperating partners here in this very nice museum of the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences. We are really glad that so many people here showed up to discuss with us the ongoing change in the polar regions and the effect this change has on all of us. We are the EU-PolarNet Consortium, and you see our consortium members on the slides behind me. EU-PolarNet is a coordination and support action which is funded by the European Commission since March 2015. We are 22 partners from 7 different European countries, covering all major European research institutions performing polar research. Together with our international partners, we are certainly the world's largest consortium of expertise and infrastructure for polar research. We are comprising natural scientists, social scientists, science managers, decision makers, and industry representatives in our consortium. EU-PolarNet is also closely cooperating with the European Polar Board, which is an independent European organization of managers of the major European national programs. The European Polar Board will also take care that the legacy of this EU project will be kept. And of course, we are cooperating with the major international organizations like the International Science Committee, the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research, and the Association of Early Polar Researchers. This, of course, gives us a broad knowledge base and the possibility to support the European Commission, we are a coordination and support action, and also other decision makers in setting their priorities. This is our main task. EU-PolarNet is certainly an ambitious project, and you will see also on the slides behind me our ambitions and our objectives. It is an attempt of Europe's polar community to speak with one voice through this project. Jointly with the stakeholders, we are trying to identify research topics of societal relevance and urgency. Even further, EU-PolarNet is also a platform to discuss these topics on an international level. Along with these, we are also discussing and recommending scenarios for a better use of the expensive infrastructure Europe hosts in Antarctica and the Arctic, which shall allow an optimization to perform world-class research in the remote and pristine areas. This town hall event here is really an important milestone for EU-PolarNet. We have gathered in the first 1.5 years all necessary background data which has been published. And we are now starting our strategic research planning process, which shall end in a research program which we will deliver to the European Commission. This is the official start of this so-called stakeholder dialogue, and we are happy that so many stakeholders are sitting here in the audience. We would like to involve you in this process, all of you. We would learn about your priorities and your research needs. We have enclosed a short stakeholder questionnaire in your conference folder, and we would be really happy if you could take a minute to fill it out. Our speakers and our audience today consist of international and national policymakers, polar scientists, representatives of industries, local communities, NGOs, and the media. We hope that we will be able to stimulate today a dialogue between all of you to jointly explore how future polar research can contribute to the climate target agreed at the COP21 meeting last year. We all know that climate change induces severe challenges to the polar region, but that it also offers a lot of opportunities. In our morning session, we will therefore going to explore what information is needed by the European society to minimize the challenges and to maximize the opportunity deriving from the changing polar areas. And polar change does not stay in the polar areas. The poles are connected with us here in Europe by many different ways. Therefore, it affects all of us. The afternoon session, which we will have today, will focus on how to better understand and predict, but also mitigate the ongoing changes in the polar regions. And the last session of the day, we are aiming to summarize the presentations and discussions into a conference statement, which we would like to jointly discuss and share with you. I also should mention that we have an art installation which is done by Julia Schnittker, a German artist, and we will have a reception in the evening where you can look at this art installation. And we hope to continue the evening with us with discussion in a bit more informal way with some snacks and refreshments. I have to pass some greetings to you. Tomorrow, the White House Arctic Science Ministerial Meeting organized by the Obama administration will take place in Washington, D.C. Representatives of the European Commission, several national ministers, decision makers of almost all countries which are performing Arctic research are gathering in Washington to discuss the Arctic science challenges. For example, they will discuss how we could strengthen and improve Arctic observation. This is an event which shall catalyze a new cooperation in Arctic science and should give us the ability to inform and serve Arctic residents and the global community. This event here today will contribute with this conference station to the Arctic Science Ministerial. And two of our colleagues are currently on the way to the Arctic Science Ministerial. These are Andrea Tilche, who is our main cooperation partner at the European Commission, and the EU-PolarNet coordinator and my director, Karin Lochte. They are sitting in the plane for Washington. That's why they are not here. But they pass us their greetings and they wish us a very successful event. And before we start with the program, I would also like to give you some impressions and some more greetings from the actual researchers in the polar areas. Christina.
Studying glaciers. We heard about the meeting in Brussels and we were pleased to hear that, and we wish you all a fruitful meeting in Brussels. Best from Greenland.
Hello EU-PolarNet. The EU project ICEARC is presently undertaking meteorological research in Greenland, where we are collecting sediment samples and sediment cores to study past climate. Today it's very warm and nice here in Greenland, and it is getting warmer up here. It's therefore very nice and good to know that you are discussing Arctic during your meeting in Brussels.
From Rotherham Research Station. We are very pleased to hear that the importance of Antarctic science is being discussed in Brussels this week, and we wish you all very well for a successful meeting.
uns ist derzeit Winter bei einer aktuellen Temperatur von minus 35 Grad Celsius. Wir sind gespannt auf die Ergebnisse eurer Diskussionen und wünschen euch eine erfolgreiche Veranstaltung. Tschüss!
Salve a tutti YOPP, grandi saluti qui dall'Antartide. La temperatura qui a Concordia in questo momento è di meno 55 gradi. Per noi è un piacere inviarvi i nostri saluti e sapere dell'importanza di questa discussione sugli ambienti polari.
YOPP, salutations d'Antarctique où nous sommes en hiver et la température est de moins 55 degrés. Nous sommes heureux des discussions et de l'importance que vous portez à l'Antarctique.
Thank you very much. I would like now to introduce our first keynote speaker of today. The first keynote speaker is João Aguiar. I practice it so often, sorry. João Aguiar Machado. He's Director General at the European Commission's Directorate for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. Mr. Machado is in charge of implementing the new common fisheries policy and to secure sustainable fisheries and a stable supply of seafood for the EU and also for prosperous coastal communities. As the DG in charge of marine policy, his mission is also to promote an integrated approach to all maritime policies. Before taking the current position, he was Director General at the European Commission's Directorate General for Mobility and Transport. Previously, Mr. Machado worked mostly on trade matters and international relations, namely as a Deputy Director General for Trade and Deputy Director General for External Relations. Mr. Machado studied economics in Lisbon and Bruges. Welcome, Mr. Machado.
Thank you, and it was well done. It's very difficult name to pronounce, I realize. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking EU-PolarNet for hosting this event and for inviting me to come here today. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and to speak to you. I greatly admire your work and the commitment towards the polar regions, in particular the Arctic region, which will be the region which I will focus more in my remarks this morning, as we just came recently with a new policy document from the Commission on the Arctic. The Arctic is a region, as you know, that is undergoing dramatic changes and that deserves our immediate attention. The climate is changing faster in the Arctic than anywhere else. In the last 40 years, the ice has been receding by around 10% every 10 years. And the winter ice has lost an area of over 1 million square kilometers, the size of France and Germany combined. There's a good chance that one summer day, between now and 2050, we might wake up to a nearly ice-free Arctic region if we don't act now. The scale of those changes make it imperative to renew the global commitment to fight climate change. The EU firm's commitment to this sense is one of the strongest dimensions of our Arctic policy. We need to reduce uncertainty. For instance, in the last International Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC, the last report, the range of uncertainty as to how the sea level will rise was still too wide. And this uncertainty is driven by other uncertainties, such as glacier melt in Greenland. Engineers planning coastal defenses in Europe and beyond want us to narrow the gap. For this reason, we emphasize the importance of research and international research cooperation on climate change in our recent joint communication of EU Arctic policy. Cooperation in research is also highlighted in the COP21 Paris Agreement. And this is why we supported the decision this year by the IPCC to devote a special report to oceans and the cryosphere. We also encouraged European scientists to take part in this work. For the Arctic, climate change is a source of risks, but is also opening new opportunities, new transport routes, access to vast and previously untapped resources, the northwards movement of fish stocks. All these changes increase the strategic importance of the Arctic. Exploiting these new opportunities requires dealing with extreme working conditions, we just saw in the short video. The European Union, therefore, proposes to make the Arctic a proving ground for sustainable innovation, for instance, by developing cold climate technologies and services and identifying Arctic standards to ensure the sustainability of processes and technologies. Because without proper management and safeguards, the opportunities that are appearing in the Arctic can become threats and can even aggravate further the current situation. And given the scale of the challenges and the global impact of developments in the Arctic, it is only natural that other regions in the world should become concerned, including the EU. And let's not forget the people who have lived in the Arctic for generations, who are now facing unprecedented changes, both from the climate itself and from the increased interest in exploiting the natural resources made possible by those changes. They sometimes struggle to make their voice heard. I am very pleased that the dialogue with indigenous people that we have established have worked even better than we had hoped for initially. We have learned much from them, and I believe you too can. Their knowledge of how the seasons are changing, of how the migration routes of animals are shifting, this knowledge goes back much further than your instruments. I can therefore only encourage you to involve them from the outset of your work. Include them in your monitoring networks. Listen to their observations as to how industrial development is affecting traditional activities. Scientific and technological cooperation and the sharing of research and observation infrastructures are also powerful instruments of science diplomacy. The Arctic is therefore an opportunity for elevating research to the policy level. Scientific dialogue can precede political dialogue, particularly when there are geopolitical intentions and interests. It keeps communication channels open and shows that collaboration can work. In this regard, Horizon 2020 offers a unique framework, considering that 5 of the 8 Arctic nations are member states of the European Union or associated countries, and that cooperation agreements exist with the remaining known 5 EU member states. These research projects are a tremendous aid to policymakers who are called upon to make strategic choices on how, for example, to adapt to climate change, and this not only in the EU. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by saying that you actually represent a real and concrete example of how Horizon 2020, and more in general, the European Union, can support fruitful collaboration between researchers that work together for the Arctic, and how you can help us achieve our goals for the region. The EU-PolarNet partnership represents, in my view, a new important instrument that can enhance synergies, not only within the European scientific community, but also beyond, through the links with scientists and networks in other parts, such as in the United States, Canada, Russia, and elsewhere. I have to say that I really admire the work that you do, that is crucial for the future of mankind and to deepen our knowledge of the changes, the tremendous changes that are happening, and a work that shows strong commitment in very tough climate conditions. And I want to congratulate all of you and wish you all the best in your discussions today and your research in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And you are too quick for me because I have a present for you. Or we have a present for you. Thank you very much for giving the speech. This is something about the Antarctic.
And this is not so Arctic.
Is anybody having questions to Mr. Machado? I think there aren't any. Everything was clear. So then we move on with our next keynote speaker. Our next keynote speaker is Dr. Paolo Ruti. He's the chief of the World Weather Research Division at the World Meteorological Organization. He's an experienced scientist and manager with strong leadership and relationship building skills, currently working as the chief of the World Weather Research Division at the World Meteorological Organization. He's a specialist with a strong focus on strategic research planning of weather and climate-related topics. He has developed extensive experience on climate service and regional climate change, also in Africa and the Mediterranean. He is in international research activities since 1996, and he has a PhD in geophysics. Please welcome Dr. Paolo Ruti.
Thank you so much for kind words. And as you listen, I think I'm starting my experience from the tropics and the Mediterranean, so it's far away from the Arctic. But now in WMO, I'm overseeing research projects looking specifically to polar regions as well. And I think that today, probably the keynote speakers, they have an easier task with respect to the panelists, that they will discuss on 1.5 degree, which is in a year where we are breaking the wall of 400 ppm on the early average. So it's quite a challenge, I think, and it will be really interesting to listen what will be discussed later on. I think now what I would like to provide you is speaking a little bit of where are we now, and what in terms of WMO research and operational activities, how we are contributing to the polar regions discussion. And I will leave to Thomas Stoker most of the discussion about the future climate change. Where will we be in the near future or at the end of the century? So let's start where are we? So this is yesterday maps from the National Snow and Ice Center, and you can easily see what is the status of the sea ice extent and what is compared to the average, to the median from a reference period. And you can see also on the plot easily the average and what is the status of 2016, also compared to the minimum that was in 2012. And of course is calling for a lot of questions from the observational perspective, from the science, but also from technical and geopolitical aspects, because of course it's clear that more and more the northeast passage is open. Some centuries ago, the first tentative to cross, the first organized tentative to have a northeast passage was organized by a Venetian geographer, Sebastian Cabot, working for the British king. But unfortunately, he was living in a period of a little ice age, and of course the North Passage was closed. But nowadays the situation is clearly different. What is the status of the Antarctica? This is just as an example. Of course, it's not representing all scientific parameters or relevant information we would like to provide. We can discuss about the two polar regions, but it certainly provides also a way to highlight the importance to speak about both Arctic and Antarctica, not only in terms of both in terms of observational needs, in terms of prediction needs, and in terms, of course, of the interest of the humankind for these two regions. But let me. So you can see here the same plot, the sea ice extent nowadays, yesterday indeed, and compared to the median. Of course, the situation in the Antarctica is different, but there are, of course, issues concerning the instabilities of glaciers. There's a recent news on the instabilities of glaciers in the Antarctica and how the climate change can affect those instabilities. And so the fresh water flow into the ocean circulation. But let me start from what is the one, but certainly a quite important initiatives sponsored and organized by the World Meteorological Organization, is the Polar Prediction Project, which is a long-term, 10 years project. And I think it's important to highlight the fact that we need more and more nowadays these long-term initiatives, because these are really important to maintain and to develop a long-term plan on what is really needed. Because, for instance, the observational network cannot be developed on a yearly basis, and we know that and the climate change, of course, is really an important, is suggesting us how it is important to have a long-term monitoring, and also in terms of research to have long-term planning. So the the Polar Prediction Project is promoting at the international level research for the development of improved weather and environmental prediction services in the polar regions, both Arctic and Antarctica. And this is promoted by WMO, and the chair is Thomas Jung from the Alfred Wegener Institute, and we thank the Alfred Wegener Institute to host also the International Coordination Office for WMO. But let me spend a few words on the context, on the background of these long-term initiatives. To make a long story short, but this is a kind of timeline, and we start from WMO as being created. But since the beginning, the research activities and the monitoring activities have been the most important aspect WMO was looking at. So the World Weather Watch and the first Global Atmosphere Research Program, that was a 15 years program starting during 60s. And then a lot of important field campaign that has been organized not just for better understanding what is going on in the tropics and the other mid-latitudes and polar regions, but to set up what is the best observational network serving society, so serving the capability we have to predict extreme events and the capability we have to monitor and to better understand the climate evolution. And this is important to highlight this fact, because nowadays is always a difficult task to explain to policymakers the relevance of this long-term monitoring. In 1905, the creation of the, between WMO and the International Council for Science, the creation of the World Climate Research Program. That has been a milestone in the development also of the following IPCC activities. And finally, looking at most recent activities related to the creation of the World Weather Research Program and the long 10 years programs on predictability. And more we are getting closer to have those communities, let's say, working closer together, the climate and weather community. And so the other message I'm trying to pass today is that while climate is going down in scale and looking to 1 kilometer scale, the weather community is now looking to a coupled system to improve prediction on the short term as well, from a few minutes to a month. So I think there is a joint effort, and more there's a need to work together. Why I'm saying this is because this is basically what is the background to the creation of this polar prediction project. So the International Polar Year, that has been a great occasion for people working together in 2007 and 2008, and the discussion of the future of the World Weather Research Program, and at the end of in late 2000, of course, the Arctic climate abrupt change. We already quoted the 2012 as a minimum in terms of sea ice extents. All those elements has been discussed by the community and by the WMO members, so 192 countries together, and has been decided that the polar regions, they were an important topic to work on. And this is the reason the background to launch these 10 years initiatives. But why? So why those countries and the research community thought that the Arctic and the Antarctica were so important? Of course, it will not be an exhaustive, let's say, discussion on why, but let's put some elements also for later on discussion. Certainly, there was a strong stakeholder engagement. Tero can probably later on during the panel discuss about shipping routing and the needs, but certainly there's a strong stakeholder needs, especially in the Arctic. We know about the Northwest Passage, the relevance for many countries developing and using the Northwest Passage between Asia and Europe and the US and the Atlantic coast of US. This is certainly a driver. We need to remember that, as has been already mentioned, by João Machado that people are living there. So there's a need from the people living, of course, in the Arctic and working in the Antarctic of new services, because climate is changing and also fishery is changing and life is changing. So there's a strong, let's say, driver from people living in those areas. This is the situation of the observing system, and a snapshot of what are the routine observation flowing to the global system and used into the prediction system nowadays, and basically what are also used for the reanalysis products or for the long-term climate products we are using for better understanding the climate as well. And you can see how what is the problem and the gap, both in the Antarctica and the Arctic. And you can see that in the Arctic you have a big gap as in the Antarctica, while of course in the northern hemisphere there is a lot of mid-latitude stations, but still a gap. Now the question is, do we need to fill this gap? Because of course we are discussing about also with donors, with the countries, and there's always a budget, let's say budget issue sometimes. So the tricky question is why, how we should explain that there's this need. I have few answers. Certainly there's a need nowadays for a couple prediction system. You can see here, for instance, a sea ice prediction system from Environmental Canada on the left. And this is another example from a high resolution MIT model. But it's just to see how important are those observations to have a good prediction system running operationally on the daily basis. And of course, there are many other examples that, of course, I should limit the number of slides I can show you. But certainly there's a need in terms of coupled prediction systems. And this is another example of why we thought this polar prediction is really important. Because it's trying to work and to bring together different perspectives. So the long-range forecast, which means the next 10 days forecast, the monthly forecast, seasonal forecast and decadal. So how a project that is looking specifically to few from minutes to month scale will be also useful for longer time scales. Because in terms of stakeholders' perspective, you can see that for each of these elements, you have different interest on the information you can use. You need long-term information, decadal information. You need to know what is going on the long term. But people living in the area and working in the area, they need long-range, monthly and seasonal prediction to better plan and to have a better life in the area as well. And this is an interesting example why is it important to have data and new observations in the area. This is a simple study which is telling us if we put synthetic observations, so observations that do not exist in the reality, but we consider we take reanalysis, so synthetic observations, and we consider this as a truth, and we force the models towards the truth, and we consider only additional observations into the Arctic. And you can see how these affect predictability on the next 5 days, the second week and the third week of the forecast. And you can see that you have positive impacts. So you have a positive impact of this additional information in mid-latitudes as well. Not only, of course, you have a strong impact on the Arctic by definition as this experiment has been developed, but you have important additional information into the forecast in mid-latitudes and also down to the Mediterranean area, so really down in the mid-latitudes. So this is a message to say that Arctic observation will provide additional information to people living in mid-latitudes as well. Is two ways. It's not just how we can provide, let's say, input and better information to people living there, but also how an observational network in the Arctic can provide better information to people living in the mid-latitudes. So what the polar prediction is doing concretely after this, let's say, introduction on why. So what? The year of polar prediction is a field and modeling campaign which is planned under the polar prediction, the WMO Polar Prediction Project. Will start beginning of the next year. It's called year because we need to use a slogan, especially, that is 2 years long. It's starting mid of 2017 and ending mid of 2019. It will be a field and modeling campaign. Why? Because we would like to see how observations, new observation in the Arctic and the Antarctica can immediately affect, influence, hopefully positively, the predictions in the two areas. So it's not only a field campaign dedicated to better understand, it's of course underlining this overarching goal to better understanding processes, but how we can set up a feasible and long-term sustainable improved observational network for the Arctic and for the Antarctica. And this is the reason why WMO is calling all members to improve for specific periods, for instance, radio sounding to 4 times per day, to improve voice release in the area, to have better, and to engage also other institutions around the world. And European Commission also provided a strong input to this process, launching 1 year ago a call for specifically for new observation in the Arctic. And now we have at least 3 European projects collaborating under this WMO umbrella for these objectives. How it will work? So we have a core phase, as I told you. This is basically mid of next year until mid of 2019, and we will try to, of course, have something later on as well. It will work to have a coordinated field and modeling campaign in the southern and northern hemisphere. Of course, first of all, it will be a modeling component because we need to bring together both the components to make sure that observation will directly influence the way models will predict extreme events in the region. And we will have special observing period in the northern and extensive buoy coverage in the northern hemisphere for specific periods, so June to September, for instance, June to September 2018, February, March in 2019. And of course we will have icebreaker there, we will have several observations, and we are trying to leverage the level of this, of the engagement of many countries around the world, not only the countries, let's say, sitting in the Arctic or close to the Antarctica. There's a strong engagement, for instance, from China to send the icebreaker with the measurements in the area during those periods. So certainly it is really an international coordination and cooperation activity. In the southern hemisphere, we will have another special observing period, of course, to cover and to better understand what is going on in the southern hemisphere summer. We have extra modeling activities, and of course we will try to extend this field and modeling campaign also late in 2019, because there is a strong German-driven, let's say, initiative, Mosaic, to leave a ship in the middle of the glaciers, in the middle of the ice in the Arctic, and to measure several parameters. Is a strong effort. Is calling also for what was happening during the 16th and 17th centuries for ships that they were trying to cross the Northeast Passage, but this is from the technological perspective completely different. But we will have, and this is, I think, is interesting, also a social campaign, because technology, science, measurements should be linked to what is going on to the people living there and the people working there. So there is a social component of this year of polar prediction, which is driven by social scientists and not by meteorologists or climatologists. So this is just to give you a flavor. Of course, this is is a planning phase, so some of those elements will change maybe in the next few weeks or next 2 months, but it's more or less what we are going, and what we are trying to coordinate at the international worldwide level. Another element I think WMO is working on, and it's really important in terms of observation, is also the Global Cryosphere Watch. So it's together not only observation on the atmosphere, ocean and sea ice, but also on the land. So we know that the permafrost is, for instance, is an important element in the region, and it also calls for strong link to the carbon cycle, and the carbon cycle is certainly an important element. I quoted this 400 ppm at the beginning, so we are breaking this wall. But behind this 400 ppm, there is certainly human activities related aspects, but there is also natural, and the better understanding the different components is a key challenge for scientists. So let me say a few words why I think it is really important that this is WMO initiative for the next 10 years. It will trigger a lot of the interaction between different communities, and it will serve not only the weather but also the climate perspective. First of all, we are motivated by strong engagement, a strong interaction with stakeholders. By definition, WMO is a collection of stakeholders, and 192 countries working together under the WMO umbrella. But there are many stakeholders, and I think the private-public partnership is one element we need to reinforce and to work together, because world is changing in several ways, and certainly we need to bring on board public and private partnership if we want to have a long-term sustainable observational network in the Arctic and the Antarctica. Otherwise, we can say that there are few chances. I think that the relevance of the year of polar prediction will be certainly key for data simulation. So how we use this observation in our modeling context, and how this modeling context will improve services and will improve long-term data set available for the climate community. Sea ice, present status of sea ice models is basically built on climate experience. But certainly this seamless approach, this weather prediction seamless approach, bringing together climate and weather community, will certainly improve these sea ice models. And I will provide you a final example on this. And certainly the focus on seasonal predictabilities is certainly a bridge between what the weather and what the climate are working on and how they can work together on this. And I think nowadays there is a strong international convergence of interest. Tomorrow, today, the White House ministerial has been mentioned, European Commission. I think there is a very unique moment. We need to be sure that we take the advantage and we develop a very long-term sustainable coordination. Because without this, let's say, political coordination, it will be difficult to maintain the observational component, the observational one. This is one example. Last example I would like to provide you is about the melt pond fraction in the Arctic. And this is basically what is the percentage of melt pond fraction in 96, and what is the status for year 2012 in May. And you can see how amazingly the two plot is a paper from Schroeder et al. Nature 2014, and you can see what is the amazingly difference. And why is so important? Because these melt ponds are actually, you can link this during May melt ponds with the sea ice extension in September. So there is first of all, a seasonal bridge between the two. But the other important element that the year of polar prediction and the polar prediction project will work at very high resolution will certainly provide new tools, new observation to improve this melt pond representation in models. And this, of course, will be so beneficial for the climate modeling perspective as well. So this is a good example how this seamless concept is providing a good answer starting from weather and going to climate. But let me just use one element, probably Thomas will provide you much more. This is, and just to remember that science is still at the base of our, let's say, it's the base of our decision for the near future. This is one example from two different models using, let's say, different shortwave feedbacks. And you can see here the Arctic sea ice extent, and you can see that the September sea ice extent. So this is the sea ice free line. And you can see that depending on the shortwave feedback, you can have a very different behavior of these models. So to have a sea ice free in 2004, around 2040 or around 2070. So it calls for the need to, of course, better understand and to have better data in the area. And this is, I think that the strong message is that we cannot just work in silos. Say, okay, science solved the problem. The climate problem is solved from scientific point of view. Now we work on the impact side, on the adaptation side. I think we cannot work anymore on silos, this kind of last century perspective. All aspects are interconnected. And we need to work and to bring all those aspects together in the near future, from the private-public partnership to the better integration of science and policy in the region. So this is just to end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paolo. Are there any questions? I guess there are, or not?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. My name is Tero Vauraste. I'm CEO of Arctia and Vice Chair of the Arctic Economic Council. I was really relieved to learn about your progress in the weather predictions and ice predictions, because that's of high importance from the stakeholders. And thank you for the contribution and collaboration. An additional question, have you looked into the east-west question? Because we have faced winters that, for instance, in the Baltic Sea, you have had very mild winters, and simultaneously in the American continent, it's been very rough. So have you looked into this phenomena? Because if you would, and if there would be this type of information, that would really help to allocate the international icebreaker resources. Thank you.
Yeah, in this context, I can say that one of the three European, let's say, funded projects is looking specifically to the link between mid-latitudes and high latitudes. I think this is the area where the answer is, probably. I think there's certainly an interaction between the Atlantic jet and its variability and the different storms affecting the high latitudes, but also how in the high latitudes storms or polar laws are developing. And this is, let's say, one component that is certainly considered in the context of the polar prediction.
Thank you. Jane Francis from the British Antarctic Survey. The models are getting better all the time, but one aspect of the Arctic that I understand, particularly from a session at the Arctic Circle meeting last year, is that predictions of methane and gases from melting permafrost are not well known. And so until we get that aspect of the models right, how are we going to move towards better models when we've got this missing component?
tricky question. I hope Thomas will provide a better answer than me. I think what we can do concretely is the cryosphere watch is certainly an important step, because it's trying to gather together all kind of information related to permafrost. So this is a first step to better understand. And there is certainly a strong effort from the World Climate Research Program, which is co-sponsored by WMO, International Ocean Commission, and ICSU, to have a strong focus on the carbon cycle and how to improve the carbon cycle elements. So I think these two components need to be fostered, and of course it's not a complete answer to your question, but it's still a first good step.
Are there any other questions in the auditorium? Yeah.
Thank you. Björn Dahlbeck, Swedish Polar Research. You certainly did a good case on the need for prediction models, and I'm thinking of Santa Claus. If Santa Claus were in this room and bought all your arguments and said, "Hey, Paolo, here is 100 million euros. Spend it the best way so we speed up the process." Because what I see is you have YOPP, this is a process, it takes time, and then you have one project called Mosaic, and that is one ship going one time to the Arctic. So I'm sitting on the sort of how to speed up question, and forget resources. What would you do with 100 million euros?
Oh yes, then later on you will tell me where is the bank with I think using a different hat as you know, in WMO we work as a manager specifically. So the first things I will do is to work on a feasibility study. So how to plan this long-term sustainable network. And this is the reason why the year of polar prediction has been developed. So it's not only a process-oriented field campaign, it's specifically a field campaign dedicated to plan the future network. So what is the minimum requirement, or what is the best we can put in place to, and we are working along those special observing period where all this information gathered by ships, by flights, and by radio sounding and other land surface measurement, we go through the GTS system. So they will be operationally integrated into the global observation system, and will be used for specific studies to understand what we can deny, so what we can use, what is the best we can use from those additional data to set up this sustainable observational network. And this is the feasibility study, which is at the base of any long-term, let's say, funding. And so the first thing is really to work on this area. And I think the year of polar prediction will provide good answers on how to tell to your friends that as in this bank account, this 100 million euro, how to spend in 2 years' time.
There's another question up there.
Mauri Oksanen, the Arctic University of Norway. There is about 5 million square kilometers of tundra flanking the Arctic Ocean, which is now being encroached by scrubland and stunted woodland, which dramatically reduces the ground albedo. How is this taken in account in this kind of modeling approach?
So, albedo is certainly one important parameter that since the beginning of the story, so at the beginning it was really, let's say, few numbers used into the models, but in the last 10 years, the way weather and the climate model they are considering, going down to the scale of 1 kilometer for weather forecast and to the scale of 10 kilometers for climate projections or 20 kilometers. I think they are more and more taking care of the albedo representations in the models, which does not mean that everything is understood. We know that there are experiments together with the ESA and other satellite agencies working at specifically looking what is the on-site measurement of albedo and what is the comparison with the satellite albedo. So it's still, let's say, a benchmark for satellite products. So I think there's a quite large interest on the topic. So it's something that is still considered an important element to be continuously upgraded into the models.
Any other questions?
Oh, Santa Claus is there.
Nicole.
Thank you very much for this nice speech.
Nicole, there was still a question here.
There was still a question. Oh, I didn't see it. Sorry.
I was a little slow getting my hand up. Thanks. Marcus Carson with the Saltland Environment Institute. And thanks, Paolo, for the presentation. What I wonder with this is if Santa Claus did arrive with a sleigh full of resources and you were able to make those models much more accurate so that we knew what was going to happen, given a set of parameters, would that, what else would we need to know in order to change the human behavior that's driving climate change? Maybe this leads us into the next panel. But in terms of uncertainty, it seems to me that the biggest piece of uncertainty there is not the physical systems.
I think it's of course a complex question and with several answers. So I will provide just one piece or one possibly. So I think this effort, this year of color prediction effort and this coordination effort, first of all, it calls for a strong coordination between, let's say for the Arctic as an example, USA, Canada, all the European Arctic countries, Russia as well, China. So is a first, let's say, strong coordination initiative for the Arctic. There are many others, I'm not saying that is the only one, but it's still a possibility to have those countries sitting close together and discussing about environmental issues and problems. And of course it's not solving the problem, because the problem is what is the mitigation and what are but it's still an important effort to continue to discuss after Paris. So Paris was an important element, but we cannot believe that Paris solved all. It's just part of the roadmap. So to have those coordination elements in place, it's an important element supporting the Paris roadmap. And of course, alone it cannot answer your question, but it's still one important element.
Thank you again. I think it's time for the coffee break, our first coffee break. I have to make one announcement before we leave into the coffee break. Here's a small coffee area left outside of the auditorium. Please don't use this. This is another conference. Our coffee break and all the refreshments are in the so-called VIP room. Please follow the signs. You have to go a bit through the museum to arrive there. And then I hope to see all of you back at 11:15 here. Thank you so much.